So I really had this vision, and I've been continuing the vision that everyone needs and benefits from recreation, from play, from sport in their lives.
Hi, and welcome to We Do That, Careers That Make a Difference. I am always excited to bring you these episodes. And today I'm extra excited because not only do we have another amazing guest, Jess Amato, who's going to talk about the power of play and recreation and sport in people's lives, but also for the first time, we now have a video version of the podcast, which is something that's been requested several times. So we finally have that. So maybe you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast, or maybe you're watching us on YouTube. So I hope you enjoy. Check out the video version. We'll start getting other stuff posted there and start doing some clips as well. And let's get to know Jess. All right, Jess, thanks for joining us today. Let's help folks get to know you a little bit. So always to know, tell me a little bit about Jess growing up. Where'd you grow up? What were you like?
So I am the youngest of four, born and raised on Long Island, New York. So growing up, my childhood, it consisted of spending the summers on a boat. So my family was into boating. So spending the summers on a boat. Who was I as a child? I was always playing cards, and I was always active outside, whether I was rollerblading, riding a bike, running around in the neighborhood, going in the pool. I was always a very active child. But at the same time, I was a minimalist at heart since I was a child. And I was the kid that my mom would take me to the toy store and say, "What do you want?" And I'd be like, "I don't want anything. I just need a crayon or a marker and a notepad," because I always wanted to be writing and learning and playing school with my mom. So that's a little bit about me as a child.
I'm curious, which of those things have carried through to adulthood?
What carried through is I'm still a writer, so I still journal since a young age. I've never stopped journaling. I still love to be active outside, and I am still a minimalist. So I don't need a lot of tangible things. I would say those three things have carried on.
Any fun stories from a kid? Anything that stands out? A boating experience, a favorite card game?
Yes, favorite card game. So as I mentioned, I'm the youngest of four. I was the baby sister that always had a deck of cards in my hand. I would always be asking everyone to play cards with me. And my card game of choice was Spit. It's set up like solitaire, same concept of going higher and lower with the cards, but you're competing against someone else. Spit playing cards was definitely the way that I annoyed my sibling and all of their friends.
I have to ask, any reason why it's called Spit? Do you know?
So there's a couple different names for it, just like any game, but spit, you at the same time have to flip a card. So I think it's a spit, like you're spitting out the next card.
We'll take that. That's better than what I was thinking. So I'll take
Yeah,
you
there's
that
no
you.
actual spit involved, just cards.
Great. All right. So you grew up in New York. How did you get to Arizona State?
I grew up, it was actually Long Island, New York, and I wanted to go as far away from New York as possible. And I wanted to be in warm weather. I didn't like Florida at the time because to me it was too muggy and buggy and sticky. And I got put on the wait list for San Diego State. So I just landed in Arizona State. And it was honestly the best thing that ever happened to me because it completely started the trajectory of my life.
Okay. We're glad you landed here. You were a rec therapy major. Did you come in knowing that's what you wanted, or did you discover it?
But it's a funny story. In theory, yes, I came in knowing exactly what I wanted, but I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know that it was recreational therapy. I knew since a young age, my mom says ever since I was in kindergarten, I would always talk about the fact that I wanted to play games with kids. That's what I wanted to do for a job. And she didn't know where it came from, but I just was always like, I want to play games and I want to work with children. And I specifically wanted to work with children with disabilities. When I went to ASU, my first semester, I was in my gen eds and I went from advisor to advisor, explaining them what I wanted to do. And every single one of them told me, it doesn't exist, you're making it up, but you can try kinesiology. I'd go to kinesiology. It doesn't exist, you're making it up, you can go to special ed. I'd go to special ed. It doesn't exist, you're making it up. And I got bounced around between all the departments. So for my spring semester, one of my friends was taking the Foundations to TR class. And I was like, you know what? I'll just take that class with you. So I literally followed their schedule because it was all similar things working with kids because they were going for special education. And I ended up in the Foundations for TR class with Kelly Ramella. And the first few sentences out of her mouth of the definition of rec therapy, I jumped out of my seat with excitement because she said exactly what I had been saying. So after class, after the very first class, I waited and I spoke to her and I told her the story. And if anyone knows Kelly Ramella, they know she's all right, we're going to advocate on day one. So we put together a packet of what is rec therapy. And I went back to every single advisor to give them the packet to say it does exist and it exists on this campus, which at that time, there weren't a lot of rec therapy programs throughout the US colleges. So that's how I ended up in rec therapy at ASU.
Kelly's a phenomenal advocate for the profession. So I hope we are doing a better job of telling our story so we don't have that anymore where people claim it doesn't exist. So I have to quiz you a little bit. Do you remember the definition she gave? What
I
stood out?
definitely don't remember the definition she gave. I remember that it was using recreation as a modality for learning. I remember those words roundabout, but I do not. There's no way I could remember exactly what it was. I apologize. I was too excited to retain any of the information. She just said all the keywords.
Yeah, that's totally fair. All right, just let's talk moments for a second. Can you think of any pivotal events that happened while you were here that determined your direction and where you wanted to go with your career, or any enduring moments from your time at ASU?
Oh my goodness. This was 2004. So a couple things is it all just fell into place. It all just felt right. The moment that I was in that class that first day, it was like, this is exactly what it was. Everything that we learned every single day from class after class was just right on point with everything, the way that my brain was working. A few things that stood out was there was one semester where we had to write WPO, written policies and procedures of operation, whatever. Kelly's going to be mad at me because I don't know exactly what it stands for, but it was writing the policies and procedures for an organization. And I remember just feeling so in the groove of looking at the bigger picture of an organization and being able to pinpoint and create and update all of the different policies and the protocols and the processes that have to go into place in order for the participants to benefit from recreational therapy. I liked the behind the scenes that lead up to making sure it happens, which also goes with from day one with Kelly was the advocacy piece, right? Anyone that knows rec therapy knows that it's not really the most well-known field. Oftentimes people know what physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy are, but you say rec therapy and they're like, what is that? Even just the advocacy piece of it, just constantly needing to talk about it, to educate people about it was something that I enjoy doing. It doesn't really frustrate me. It excites me to be like, ooh, another person that I could tell all the cool things that we do. There was one class that we took that I really liked where we went through a lot of different modalities in terms of facilitation techniques, where we were able to dive into the versatility of activities connected to rec therapy, which right away I was like, this is amazing because you could stay in the same career path for now until the end of time, but no 2 days need to look the same because depending on who you're working with, you're constantly adjusting what your approach is. And I really like that.
The WPO is still the capstone project for our students, so that has not changed. So, looking back to your college years with a little perfect hindsight, what advice would you give to yourself or to your current student pursuing a rec therapy degree or just a college student in general?
I have so many pieces of advice for people across the board in life, specifically for a college student. I would say looking at the big picture, knowing what your why is and what your purpose is to what really drives you and motivates you and not losing sight of that, even in the hard moments, and being willing to make sacrifices now to get you to where you want to go. Because from my experience with rec therapy, there's so many pivotal ways. Like you have your course, but then there's so many different offshoots. And sometimes you have to go on an offshoot in order to come back to the main course. And so I think knowing what your why is and figuring out how to keep bringing it back to that in those moments and keeping your eye on the big picture.
I love that. And I always take my first day of my class, I also go into our intro classes and I tell my story and I talk about your why and holding on to that, especially at the times where you're like, oh, I'd have to go to class today. Oh, I have to do this
Mhm.
assignment. Really tap in into why you're doing this. So I love that advice. So I'm going to push you a little bit because you said you had lots of advice. So give me one more.
So, one more, and this has really helped me, and being a rec therapist, it's actually helped me, is practicing what you preach. As rec therapists, we are looking at using recreation, play, activities to help individuals achieve whatever goals it is that they're working on, right? All of us benefit from a healthy leisure lifestyle. So when I say practice what you preach, it means constantly be thinking about what is your leisure? What does play look like for you when you were a child, when you're a young adult, when you're a younger professional, as you go through your career? Because if I sit there and I'm trying to change the world through play, but I don't know how to play myself, that's going to limit me to the progress that I could make in communities and working with individuals. So practicing what you preach. And the reason why I say it's unique, but it's helped me is I've left a lot of jobs. And the reason has been because I love to travel. And so I'm constantly relocating. So when I get to a new interview and it's like, hey, why were you only at just this job for 2 years? It's because I practice what I preach. And it was no longer aligned with what I was looking for through my personal and my professional life. And that's why I had to move on.
So let's get into your career. And I really want to spend some time talking about platform to play because I think it's really exciting what you're doing there. But let's help folks get there first.
Absolutely. So the short version is I started out with more of the clinical mindset. So my internship and my first job out of college was in a long-term pediatric facility and also an acute care facility. So it was very much so the hospital path when it comes to rec therapy. At first, it's what I really wanted. I really just wanted to work with children, but that was just what was driving me towards that. And then through working at one of the hospitals, I ended up getting an opportunity to work with their after school young adult program, which was more the community coming to the hospital for certain programs. And that opened me up to life outside of the hospital walls. And then from there, I just kept taking another step forward. Every time a window or a door would crack open, I would peek my head in. And if it was a good opportunity or an opportunity enough, I would take it. So I started, like I said, the clinical route. I've worked in physical rehabilitation hospitals. At Ability 360 in Phoenix, I was one of the original staff there. So, fully universally accessible sports and fitness center for people with disabilities and their families. I worked in schools specifically for children with disabilities. And then I went to an organization in New Hampshire called Northeast Passage. And that was an amazing opportunity because for 5 years, I ran the school based rec therapy program where we were in public schools in students' IEPs as recreational therapists, which is a really amazing opportunity that does not exist enough in the United States or anywhere. And then from there, I started my own company, Platform to Play.
So tell us about platform to play.
Yeah, before I go fully into Platform to Play, one of the things I skipped over was so when I was working at Northeast Passage, because it's a program of UNH, I managed to get my master's in community development. I've made a lot of sacrifices, always looking at the big picture. And I always knew I wanted to have my own company. I always knew that my brain and my vision and my passion was much bigger than any little box that I could fit in. So I knew I wanted to do something on my own eventually. Completing my master's in community development was that final piece because I ended up being able to create and implement a 2-year project in Zimbabwe using my knowledge as a recreational therapist in the communities in Zimbabwe. And that was the final piece. So when I finished my master's, it was like, all right, I'm ready. I can do this. I'm going to start my own thing. And so I started Platform to Play back in 2020. I started it a couple months before the pandemic happened. And it's been an adventure. One of my very close friends and a business mentor of mine, he said to me from day one, when I was worried about what my logo was going to be and what my name of the organization was going to be and every little bit of information I wanted to know, he was like, just start the organization and it will evolve. What you start with today is not what it's going to look like in 6 months or 6 years or in 10 years. And he was right, because when I started it with this vision in mind, and what it is today is it's already different. And we're only 6.5 years into it. When I started Platform to Play, I started with a mission to create awareness, autonomy, and explicit opportunity for all. So my vision was, and my belief is, that everyone deserves a platform to play. It's how we learn about ourselves, and it's how we learn about the world around us. So I really had this vision, and I've been continuing the vision, that everyone needs and benefits from recreation, from play, from sport in their lives, whether you have an identified disability or not. So I truly believe that recreational therapy is something we all need, and that I want to be in everyone's lives. I never take that hat off. I'm always looking at everything from the lens of a recreational therapist and a community developer. So I've really focused on how can I use play? And when I say play, it's anything and everything that's motivational, that's fun, that someone might be good at, to help them work on the more challenging stuff. I've been using play as a way to guide and support individuals and communities in reaching their highest potential. What that looks like is it looks very different depending on the contract and who I'm working with. I've worked with schools around creating and sustaining a culture of play for all learners and for all staff. So how can we integrate play into the school day beyond recess? What are games that teachers can be playing in order to help students learn their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s? But more importantly, how can we use play to support the social and emotional learning that's needed in order for the academic success? I've done a lot of work with schools around a culture of play. I've also facilitated a lot of inclusion training, working with parks and rec departments, boys and girls clubs, other nonprofit and community organizations on how to make sure that their programs are inclusive of all participants. So when we think about inclusion, it's not just physical disabilities. It's also thinking of individual sensory stimulation, sensory systems. It's thinking of different social barriers that exist, different emotional barriers that exist. So how can we make sure that it's an inclusive environment for all of our participants? And then I've done a lot of program development, working with residential programs, specialized schools, and even a public after school program on how do we make sure that our programs are the most inclusive for everyone, but then also how do we make sure that we are putting play and recreation as a priority and as a value within the culture of the organization. So those are 3 buckets. And then where my passion lies, and this is where I'm the most excited, is what I've been calling for many years passion projects. So passion projects have been my way of saying how I could make the world a better place by volunteering my time and not making any money in doing so. So what the passion projects have been, projects like the one I mentioned in Zimbabwe. So I have created and led projects through passion projects in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Vietnam, and Kenya to date. I go into the community, I work with the community from the ground up to identify what are their barriers, what are their challenges, what is their culture around play, around disability, and then we create workshops for families of children with disabilities. We also will offer trainings for professionals and for teachers. And then we put together events. So we put together community events where we can play as a way to break down the barriers of discrimination that exist in those parts of the world for kids with disabilities and their families.
So I want to back up a second before we get to the international stuff. But let's say I'm a teacher or a coach or work with kids in any way. What are some of your top tips for being inclusive?
These are very big questions because there's no cookie cutter answer. Everything I do is very customizable. So, a couple of my go to games is I love this game called Popcorn, where what I like to focus on is that when we think about inclusion and we think about play, we think we need a lot of equipment. We think we need a lot of money to make it happen. And we think we need a lot of time to plan and set it up and prepare for it. None of that is true. We can play a quick 30-second game, a 5-minute game, or an hour-long game, and they're all going to have benefits. So first, it's just educating the professionals on the fact that play and inclusion are a lot more simple than we as a society believe. So a quick game that I like to play is called Popcorn. So it's a simple counting game where, say you have a group of 20 students, and you're trying to count to 10 out loud. There's a few rules where no two people could speak at the same time or you start over. You have to count in order. So if I say 1 and then you speak next and you say 5, we start over. And numbers can't be repeated. So if I say 1 and then you say 1, we start over. And as a group, without coming up with a specific pattern, we bounce back and forth between I say 1, you say 2, someone over there says 3, 2 people say 4, we all laugh, and then we start over. And it's a lot of social cues, reading the room, right? And a lot of impulse control because everyone wants to be a part of the winning round, right? So we all want a voice, but if there's 20 kids and only 10 numbers, that's not possible, right? So impulse control, making eye contact, body language. Oh, it looks like Eric's about to speak, so I shouldn't speak yet. And at the end of the day, it's just building and experiencing. It's building the social dynamic by experiencing positive shared experiences together. So that's one of my go-tos that you could play with any age and in any setting. And you could play it hundreds of times because I've had classes that have played it every Friday for an entire school year to see how high of a number they can get as a group and as a class.
So let's talk about the international stuff. Malawi, Kenya, Vietnam. Interesting story. You and I discovered this on our pre-recording call, right? You and I have been in the same place in Malawi doing somewhat similar work. It's mostly my wife's work, but I have been there as well. So Malawi is in South Central Africa, the warm heart of Africa, one of the poorest countries in the world. I know there's no typical day, but tell us, what's that like?
Yeah, it's amazing. It speaks to my heart more than anything, any of the work that I've done in my entire career. So, one of the things that I love most about the work that I do in developing communities all over the world is that the tiniest, most foundational, simplest, most basic knowledge that I learned on day one in Foundations to TR goes so far in parts of the world. Whereas here, we're already doing incredible work. There's so many programs, there's so much access, there's so much opportunity that if I go into a school group in New York and I have a balloon, sure, I could entertain the kids with it. Sure, we could make it a whole entire reflective circle. Absolutely, they're going to gain so much from it, but they won't have the true appreciation and gain the same benefit and values as a child in Malawi who I blow up a balloon and we start playing Keep It Up, which seeing how many times we could hit it before it hits the ground. That is something that is going to make a lasting impression on their life because it's nothing like anything they've ever experienced before. And that's the difference in two different experiences with domestic work and international work, specifically in developing communities.
So I get a lot of students who are like, oh, I want to work internationally. So what advice would you give to them?
Do it.
Yeah.
Do it. There are so many opportunities. There's so many organizations. There's so many nonprofits and grants and funding that does exist if you look under the right rocks and you ask the right questions and the right people. But there are challenges too. There's cultural challenges. There's an experience that I've never experienced anywhere outside, that I've only experienced throughout parts of Africa, is they see me as an American who's white, and I arrive and they're like, amazing, give us all the knowledge and all of the money. Not in a negative way, but that's what their thought process is. And so as a community developer, it's no, I'm here to learn together, to build something together, to figure out a sustainable project and solution together. You can give all the equipment, you can give all the supplies, you can give all the money, you can share all of your knowledge. But unless you build something from the ground up, from the inside out with a community, it's a one and done experience and it doesn't have the lasting impact. So my advice is figure out when you are partnering up with organizations, even if it's to volunteer, that their values align with yours. So I started just volunteering. I started by my first experience in Africa and in a developing community was in Ghana. And this was right after college. At the time, there was a book that I looked through that had volunteer organizations. Now you could just do a quick Google search. I just looked for organizations that I could contact and reach out to in terms of volunteer opportunities that aligned with what I wanted to do. So I reached out to this organization that could pair me up in Ghana working with children. And I went there for 3 weeks. I went there and I hung out with the kids. I played games with them. It really was very open ended. There wasn't anything specific I had to do. It was just a matter of my presence being there. But being a rec therapist, we played everything and anything. They taught me things, I taught them things, and we had a blast. And so I started by volunteering and networking. So it's starting with one small step of reaching out to people in terms of networking, and just give it a try because you don't know where it's going to lead you next.
The other thing I think people should know going into this work is that it is gritty, hard work. I think there's lots of, oh, I'm going to work internationally and I'm going to play with kids and it's going to be this magical, amazing, life-changing moment. And yes, those moments happen and I've had those moments as well. But it also can be gritty and grinding and difficult and exhausting. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. My 2-year project in Zimbabwe for my master's in community development, we had put together a community event where we managed to get about 500 people to one location, children with disabilities, their families, their schools, their community, and professionals that worked with them and coaches. And it was this amazing event that it took so much to make happen. And right before the event, there was a couple things. One, families, no one could get to the event. It only cost $1 for them to take the bus to and from. No one could get to the event. So we ended up needing to, last minute, it was just something that missed it. Within the last minute, we had about 72 hours and we had to go through and find local taxi vans to go and pick up 500 people to transport them to the event and then transport them home, all because there was no way to financially support it with getting every single person $1. Another thing, I had families that came, and this was a very big mix up. And I learned from that people are motivated for different reasons to come to things. And sometimes you have to motivate them, even if it's outside of the why behind it all, just to get in front of them so that they could experience the benefit. And culturally, events are required to have food in Zimbabwe, or at least in this community in Zimbabwe. We did not have food. We timed it in a certain way that we thought we didn't need to have food because we were trying to keep the cost down and we were trying to work with the resources that we had. And it was a big fail because of that. Not the event, but the fact that we didn't have food because now you have these families that some are traveling for hours to get to the event. Now we have nothing to feed them and they have to travel hours back home. It became a whole entire thing. So I learned from that. And any of my events that I've been doing moving forward, even if it's just for an hour event, is to have snacks. So there's things that happen in the mix of it all that you learn from, and that all goes back to culturally. It just goes back to what is the cultural norm. So even though there's certain things that I could be stubborn with when it comes to running an event in Arizona, I can't have that same stubbornness if I want people to come and to participate in the activities.
You mentioned food, and it reminds me, I've eaten food I did not want to eat to
Yes,
be
yes,
culturally appropriate. And I'm sure I've spent many nights under mosquito nets and in cold showers and washing clothes in showers, washed a lot of
yes.
clothes in showers. Malawi internet is spotty. It's getting better, I understand, with Starlink. Electricity is spotty. So I don't want to make this sound horrible because it is life-changing and meaningful, but I also want people to be aware that it's not just all glamorous.
Of
Here's
course.
a pretty picture.
I actually, another part kind of around what you're talking about, that it's not all glamorous. So we ran this event. It was amazing. I was outside from sun up to sundown, and I'm in Zimbabwe. There's really strong sun. Even though I don't burn normally in the Zimbabwe sun, it's a little bit stronger. So I was covered, arms, legs, everything. I forgot to wear a hat that day. So the only thing that wasn't covered was my face. By time we were done with the event, my adrenaline's running, right? Because for hours I'm managing so many different things to make this a success. We're at the end and I'm with my team and I'm like, my face hurts. Why does my face hurt? I got so burnt. It burnt in a way I've never experienced in my life, just on my face, because that was the one thing I forgot was a hat. And I didn't even think of it until I felt it at the end of the day. But it's even something like that, right? Even in the mix of all this amazing success, it's like I failed my own face. And that is a factor in it, is things that we need to learn from and realize.
So let's talk about skill sets for a minute. What skill sets do you think someone who's interested in following a career path like yours or the international work, what skill sets do you think they need and how can they be developing those now?
Being adaptable, being flexible, being able to figure things out on the fly and not have a script that you have to stick to. And if you go off course of it, you can't handle it, you lose it. And that's as a rec therapist in general, no matter where you are. Being open minded. So being open minded to other cultures as well as your own strengths and weaknesses. Vulnerability is really important. It's funny because it's all things that I think we try to teach as rec therapists, right? We're trying to guide our participants and our students on how to be the best version of themselves. And it's being able to look in the mirror and ask ourselves those same questions and navigate that at the same time is really the skill set. It's being able to look in the mirror, be vulnerable with it, know that we don't have all the answers, and we're constantly willing to be a sponge and to learn as much as possible from others and from the experiences. Organizational skills are very helpful. So being able to, I've worked with some rec therapists that are all over the place, but it definitely helps if you can create a to-do list and follow that to-do list in an efficient
Mhm.
manner and time management with it. But to me, the main thing is being able to meet people where they are and to be genuine and authentic in all of your connections that you experience.
Yeah. So that's great advice as we head towards wrap up. As we call this podcast Careers That Make a Difference, how does your career make a difference?
So it makes a difference in my world, in my life, and every minute of my day is connected to everything we've spoken about. And my goal is to as many people with and without disabilities all over the world have access to play, experience it, and can use it as a way to achieve their highest potential. I'm hoping I'm making a difference. I know that I'm making a difference in my own life. And I've met lots of people that have said the same about their experiences with me. So it's just helping people learn about themselves and the world around them through play.
Yeah, just I know you're making a difference, so I appreciate it and love seeing all that you're doing. The last question on our way out here. If someone is listening to this and is really inspired by the work you're doing, as I know I am, is there a way they can get involved with Platform to Play, either as a volunteer or perhaps they want to support you in some way? How would they do that? How would they find out more?
Absolutely. So, Platform to Play, I have a website, platformtoplay.com. I have an email, jess at platformtoplay.com, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the stuff. I actually have my newest and my largest initiative to date is called Platform to Play, a tour across Africa. So, the whole purpose around that is I want to return to the three countries that I've been in Africa that I already have projects in place is Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. And I want to add two other countries, Uganda and Ghana, to the mix and have projects going across 5 countries within a 1 year span of each other, doing all this work that we've spoken about. So, one way that they can absolutely help is to spread the word about that, whether it's to nonprofits that can help with fiscal sponsorships, or whether it's in-kind donations, whether people are interested in volunteering and providing their own support, any networking in terms of, I know this person that knows that person, or any connections like that. I'm in the process of, I have all the connections, I have all the pieces in place. It's just a matter of the funding to support the initiative. So even just spreading the word or liking a post of mine will go so far.
So I know you mentioned the website. Did you mention the Instagram as well?
It's at
Platform to Play,
Platform to
right?
Play.
Great. Okay. So we'll make sure we're promoting it through our modest little podcast here, and hopefully folks are as well. And Jess, thanks for chatting with me. And perhaps the next time we physically cross paths, maybe in Blantyre, Malawi, which should be super fun because I need to get back there. I probably next
Absolutely.
summer. Yeah. All right,
Absolutely.
Jess, thank you so much again, and we'll continue to follow along with your work.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And if you are interested in learning more about one of our degrees and how you can make your mark on the world, you can find out more at scrd.asu.edu. SCRD is the abbreviation for our school. Again, that's scrd.asu.edu. Or email me at eric.legg@asu.edu. That's eric.legg@asu.edu. I promise I'll answer every email, and I hope you enjoy our guest.